All right, good night, folks, and welcome to our podcast. Welcome below the belt, folks. Tonight we're talking about sugar wars. We're talking about dreams, death, and deception in the sugar industry. Dreams, death, and deception in the sugar industry, folks. You all know when we come on I love the podcast because we decided very early that we're going as informal as possible. Share the live, folks. Smash that emoji button as well, and make sure you partner with us so we can keep on keeping on. All right, so I'm using the opportunity, folks, and I invite you guys as well. You know, when we come on, we want to share the live. We want to smash that emoji button, folks. Please and thank you, so that other folks can get the valid and credible information as well. It's not a good evening until we get a nightcap with you guys. We talk a couple of things and then we out of your ears. We're not going to talk so much about issues, or rather, we're not going to talk so much about people as we are going to talk about some of the issues that are prevailing. And I really want to keep the focus on what the focus should be kept on. Pay some power, boots on the ground, and let us keep moving forward, good folks. Let us keep moving forward. I'm sharing the live as I talk to you, believe it or not. Right? Who you get to stay in a studio these hours, eh? These hours, but we got to do what we got to do, folks, because we want you folks to keep getting the valid and credible information. Please and thank you. It's been an eventful day. Welcome to our broadcast officially. Welcome to our podcast, Below the Belt. You all know it's been an official day, and you all perhaps know more than I did. I had a long drive to New Amsterdam today and a long drive back. You know, it was good. I got a chance to catch up with some of my colleagues, and also got a chance to hear myself think for a little bit. You know, while it's important to work and to work and to work, it's important to, think as well. Think about your actions. Think about things that have happened, things that are to come. Ring my poker face. You know, it's which philosopher, guys? I know you all know these things more than I do. Which philosopher talks about the examined life? You know, we got to examine things. Sandra Ford, good to have you here. Karen Clark, good to have you here. And Akita Washington and Roxy Daly Austin, good to have you here. Look, you all see in this political life, decisions you make, some friends say, yes, I did with you. And some friends say goodbye. But you have to have the political maturity, to dance between the raindrops. I think it's the philosopher Bob Marley who says, some friends we had, some friends we lost along the way. Sugar wars, dreams, death, and deception. That's our discussion tonight, good folks. Good to have all of you on our broadcast, Below the Belt. I love this theme music. It's a little pick me up or for me. One of the things, switching camp and changing gears and what have you. I don't want to take I don't want to take the emphasis off of the PPP for too long, because it's like giving them a free pass, and they have been doing so much, folks. I want to share some of that with you, and we don't talk enough about these issues like the sugar industry, for instance, sugar wars, dreams, death, and deception. And I wish I had tonight on with me Kemraj Ramdatan, who has been like a father to me and one of my political mentors. I wish I had him on because he understands these issues. But I'm telling you this, from next week, we just wanted to restart the podcast, to come off the start the start line. And then next week, we got quite a few interviews lined up for this time slot here. Quite a few people we can be tapping into. to help us to make sense of some of these issues with you guys. And so, look, we have had, they tell us, close to 30, 40 billion dollars that have been pumped into the sugar industry, and it's still sinking. Believe it or not. What is really happening to Gaisuku? And I know some of you understand these issues far better than I do, but I've been tracking it. You know, I have been tracking it in my own little way for 5 years now. And that is why I remember. Thank you, Ray Lily, for your kind thoughts. Thank you. I've been tracking what's been happening at Gaisuku. Beyond the Spanish girls in the boardroom, when Zulfikar came into office as the agriculture minister, one of the things he said, they're going to do a study of the sugar industry, to try to rationalize it. Does it make sense? Do a study so they can see if there's a path forward for sugar in this country. Yvette Madu, Ali, Bellamona, Troy, and Yonette, they never got around to it. They never got around to it. That's the short of it. And so it's like throwing money in a black hole. That has been the experience with Gaisuku. But tonight, we're going to unpack this clash of visions, the contradictions of leadership at Gaisuku. We're going to talk about the battle over who's telling the truth about sugar. There's a battle about that. So I want to welcome you guys again. You all are up late in the evening, and we do this program as we do these programs as a nightcap. This late edition of it as a nightcap for you guys. Simone and Jennifer and Tommy, Anita. Simone says they want to study how they can thief the money. But welcome, folks. Welcome. This is the Christopher Ram versus the Paul Chung debate about the sugar industry that has been playing out in the letter columns of the daily newspapers, to the extent where they're telling us that Gaisuku now threatens, to sue Sabrok News for its publication of Christopher Ram's commentary on the sugar industry. Wow, this is new. This is new to me, that people can't comment on the sugar industry. Isn't this fair comment? Isn't this fair comment? And that's why we're talking tonight about Gaisuku's management for the next 20 minutes or so, the PPP's promises, and the APNU AFC's efforts. Those are the things we're talking about. Right? Those are the things we're talking about. Let's get into the first part of this. I love the theme. Let's talk about this Christopher Ram critique. And we've interviewed Christopher Ram quite recently. He says, Christopher Ram, that Paul Chung has been recycling a failed model of mechanization, right? And tech jargons. He's a recycled man. And Ram also says that the PPP has been, their spending of this $30-40 billion subvention over the last 5 years to Gaisuku, it has been wasteful. That's what he says. And directionless. How many of you agree? How many of you agree? And he points to a lack of transparency at Gaisuku, a lack of accountability, a lack of managerial competence that has caused this kind of wastage of this huge subvention to Gaisuku. And he is called, Christopher Ram, famed attorney at law, famed chartered accountant, and I dare say he wears a lot of caps, but he's a fighter for the rights of Guyanese. Right? He has been calling for a sugar revival, right? Or rather, calls the sugar revival a political slogan, right? He says it's not an economic plan; it's just a political slogan. And of recent, we heard perhaps Irfan Ali talking about making sugar great again, but we're coming down there. So those have been some of the thoughts of Christopher Ram. And now enter Paul Chung. He's the CEO of Gaisuko. He got a big, big remuneration package. Big, big, like 3 ministers put together, plus the fringe benefits. And I ain't talking just about the Spanish girls, eh? Here's what the current CEO of Gaisuko said, pushing back against some of what Ram has said. He accuses Ram of repeating tired narratives and highlights his personal experience as a cane farmer, the Private Sector Commission chair, and a board member. He said this qualifies him to lead the sugar industry, and he blames, like the PPP, the underwhelming performance of the sugar industry on weather and labor challenges. Right? He blaming that. The man before, he used to do the same thing. Y'all remember Sister, right? See? Yeah. We didn't have enough weather for Sister Ryan Singh to cast blame. And here you got no Paul Chung walking in instead. He is touting that a 22% reduction in downtime. He points to an 11%, he says, increase in yield. He points to the use of drones and other inputs. He said he's touting these as part of what he has done, part of his leadership. Doesn't sound like too much to me, right? He says, I'm not here for the applause. I'm here for the progress. Everybody likes applause once in a while. We're all about progress. He wasn't for progress when the last administration said, don't stop the progress. So those are some of the contentions of the CEO, Paul Chung of Gaisuko. Now, folks, Ram is saying basically that Gaisuko has been politically hijacked and it is economically doomed. I support this. When you see how they keep revising the sugar targets down, just now the target could be 0. So Ram is saying, these guys haven't done well. They hijacked the thing politically, right? But it has no economic future. While Paul, on the other hand, Paul Chung, the current CEO, he's positioned himself as the face of reform and mechanization at Gaisuko. But who is right? That's the question. Who is right? Now, these are the issues, friends, that we hope that you all go and you talk with your family about, your kids, talk with your neighbors, your workmates, and say, you're able to articulate these issues when you see them appearing in the press. Simply accept that. Why are we here? Iron sharpen iron. So does a man sharpen the countenance of his friend. So does a man sharpen the countenance of his friend. So that is some of the debate that is happening currently. I want to turn your attention to some of what the APNU AFC tried to do during its term, during its tenure in office. Yeah. When I hear this theme music, I get a little pep in my step, you know how. And as you folks know, the APNU AFC government been in office from 2015 to 2020. And in its own way, that did what it called right-sizing the industry. You got to make it fit for purpose. For instance, you don't want to have a 30 room house. You're doing bed and breakfast. It's not a hotel. It's just you and your husband. How you cleaning that? How you keeping that going? It must be fit for purpose. You don't like people. You don't have nobody over, but you got 30 rooms inside there. You put yourself in some problem. You're going to put yourself in some problem. And so, part of the APNU AFC effort with sugar has been right-sizing, retooling staff, right? Empowering staff to go in a different direction, but walking with them step by step through the process, because sugar became unsustainable at the production cost. Today, it remains the same. And you all should know this by heart. Now, you all know we produce sugar at $1.30. I always started at 100. And then it sounds odd, and I recalibrate. You know, the government produces sugar at $1.30. Other countries are producing sugar for 30 cents. So you understand, right? You understand that it's unsustainable at that production cost. I see young political activists, young politician, Onyx Duncan, his family, all Duncans are related. Onyx is on the live, and Onyx tell us, look, Onyx has another cost. It's the same story though, right? Global market prices, Onyx says, is 17 to 35 cents, and we're producing at $1.14. It's still the same thing. There's a wide. How are you making up for that shortfall in cost there, right? It means that you're running a charity. It's a sugar charity. Onyx should be able to just go in the shop and pick up a pound of sugar free of cost because it's a charity we're running. So unsustainable production costs. We recognize this. Haven't done the work in the industry. Haven't studied the thing. A bloated workforce. If you got less field to cultivate, how are you going to save among the staff? So there was definitely a bloated workforce. And the sugar industry was heavily in debt. Heavily in debt. Here how we knew the financial trouble the sugar industry was in. You remember the coalition came into office. When the coalition came into office, you remember? Was it May 15, 2015? Y'all help me out. Y'all sharper. Tommy Gibbs. It wasn't it May 15, 2015? May 15, 2015, the coalition came into office. By July of that year, Gaisuko's leadership under the PPP, we hadn't changed the leadership there as yet at Gaisuko. Gaisuko's leadership told the country that the industry was bankrupt. That is where the PPP had led it after 23 years. And they come to tell us, we don't like the sugar industry. Bankrupt under PPP's leadership. Folks, but this is what I want to get to, because we don't talk about these things often enough. As the APNU AFC started right-sizing the industry, right, fitting it, suiting it for purpose, it began reskilling programs. It began what it called economic resilience measures, right? Some of which involved retraining staff so that some folks who had a passion, to go into the oil industry. There was oil and gas training. There was a program called In Step. This is how you're retooling people now. We're not producing the quota of sugar that we used to. So we're right-sizing the industry for the global market. The APNU AFC government started retraining, as I said, sugar workers in welding and electrical work, so that perhaps when you're done cut cane, you got another fallback. You see, there was even job placements. We don't talk about these things nearly enough. Right? The GCCI was asked for skill profiles, right, for the private sector absorption of sugar workers. And then there was a focus on entrepreneurship. You're retooling the people at Gaisuko. There were forums on investment. There were forums on financing. There were forums on business planning. Right? Forums on business planning, because the government started thinking, when we give employees the severance, we can't keep everybody. We'd love to do it. But when we give employees the severance and so on, They should understand how to invest. They should understand how to create businesses, you know. And this is a direction that the APNU AFC government went into. There were apprenticeships that happened in the area of auto mechanics and even sugar boiling for those persons who were staying on. And then there were also alternative contracts. There were alternative contracts for these now persons who were going to be redundant workers. You see, they were offered contracts in planting. There were some staff members who would have been given, apologies folks, some staff members who were going to be given swaths of land to do subsistence farming. All of that the APNU AFC government did for the sugar workers as they begun to right size the industry. And folks, I tell you, we were castigated for that. And though the APNU AFC's approach wasn't perfect, it was rooted in economic realism. Cut the losses, support the displaced workers, and transition towards sustainable development in the sugar industry. That was it. In short, right? Cut your losses, support the displaced workers through all of those training activities I just told you about, and others. I'm just giving you a snapshot in the short time that we have together. And transition the industry now towards sustainable development. That was the aim, folks. That was the aim. And then the PPP struck. The PPP struck. Yeah. The PPP returned and engaged in some very, very costly resuscitation of closed sugar plantation, as though they were never involved in closing sugar plantation. Who closed the plantation at Success? Who closed that one? Who closed the plantation at Diamond? All happened under the PPP. But when they do it, they call it different names. The PPP had some promises in 2020. They said they were going to reopen shuttered estates. How many have been reopened in 5 years? They said they were going to revive sugar through partnerships, investment, and modernization. How far along are they with that, folks? Have you asked yourself that? How far along are they with that? As I said, they spent between 30 and 40 billion dollars. Billion with a capital bill. Right? They spend that money since 2020. And what have we seen for that? Friends, what has been the return for that money spent in the industry? Eva, Wenda, Ali Dates, Diane Gravesandi. We've seen estates failing to meet production targets. They promised a deal, a sweet deal, with the United Arab Emirates. This with the Middle Eastern folks, our friends from the Middle East. Never happened. Never happened. Never happened. So much for the promises. And these folks could tell us, oh, we finished the manifesto. We don't need extras. Despite the PPP earlier claims, Jillian Solomon, never happened. This UAE deal. And Jack Joe now says, it is more about income than the industry. There's no method to his madness, you know. It's just madness. And Paul Chung, the current CEO of Gaisuko, you know, it's alleged he can't explain the full use of the 2025 $13 billion subsidy. So a lot of money being poured into the industry, but you're not getting the returns. You're not getting the return. Imagine if that kind of money was poured into public servants, poured into your family, my family, you know. Here what Christopher Ram said, one of the things Christopher Ram said, following Onyx numbers there, right? We producing at $1.14, and other countries doing it between 14 cents and 35 cents. How are we going to compete? Christopher Ram says it would be cheaper to import sugar than to keep producing sugar under these present circumstances. Right? It would be cheaper to import sugar. Cheaper to import than to produce it under the circumstances that it is done currently. We got a couple minutes left. I want to shoot a couple additional things at you folks as we wrap up. So we told you all about this debate. We told you all about this debate between Paul Chung and Christopher Ram. Right? We said the pace at what the PPP tried to do when they came in, as against what they ended up doing. And then we told you guys so far a little bit about what the APNU AFC did for the sugar workers as they tried to right-size the sugar industry, fit it for purpose. Right? And now we're hearing about diversification of the sugar industry. Is it diversification, friends? Or is it deflection? All that I told you about the training, retooling of the staff at Gaisuko, so that when we right-size it, those persons who the industry could no longer sustain in its labor force, they could still find meaningful employment. We were castigated. We were abused down. We were shouted at. We were called all kinds of names. We know about sugar. We want Zulfi, the sugar czar. Zulfi, the sugar whisperer. And now we're hearing Irfan just run in. I know y'all might have been distracted who come in, who go in, and who has stayed. Irfan Ali has just said that they want Gaisuko to produce rice, cassava, and corn. You just get sugar from rice? This is the 21st century. Anything is possible? I don't know. You hear about cassava sugar? Corn sugar? Corn syrup? Irfan said they got to diversify. Why is that? Why all of a sudden? Is this the coalition plan to sneak in it? Because they realize now that sugar really ain't working out. It had nothing to do with the APNU AFC government. It's the demands of the global market. Irfan Ali says, we will produce rice, cassava, and corn and turn estates into agro-processing hubs. The other evening when we discussed Gaisuko very briefly, one of the things I pointed out, tell me if you remember, whenever this government talks about Gaisuko, it is always aspirational. It is never what has been actually accomplished. It is always to come. And here's another one. They want to turn the estates into agro-processing hubs. Right? Agro-processing hubs. Here's my brother Onyx Duncan saying that this transition strategy, the government exploring diversification of molasses from rum, value-added sugar, private management, estate divestment. Onyx says it's bare BS. I tend to agree with them. Bare BS. So they want to turn estates into agro-processing hubs, produce rice, sugar, corn. He talked about co-investment with workers in new businesses. Isn't this exactly what the last government was doing? Understanding that sugar is not getting better in terms of the cost of production. That is a charity, and we got to retool. This is the same thing Irfan saying here. When he talks about co-investment in workers, or co-investment with workers in new businesses. That is why the last administration did all that business training with the sugar workers. They said about 3,000 more hectares for mechanization. Where? Where? If you could have done it, you would have already did it. And then they talk about 20 new proposals for manufacturing. They're selling dreams, folks. This is the PPP selling dreams. Is this genuine diversification, Onyx? Or is it just political rebranding? It didn't work out one way the last time. You see? See, bring it back under another name. Diversification or political branding. Right? I've heard a lot of commentators say, it's just sweet talk without any sugar. It's just sweet talk by the sugar. You know, it's Diet Coke. So the question is, can Gaisuko successfully pivot while still bleeding cash? Can it pivot successfully and still be bleeding cash? You got to give large cash injections. You all know the National Assembly has not been dissolved. It is not. So they could come back for a little money. Folks, they can come back. But here's the PPP track record. Here is the PPP track record. Here's it. Love it, love it. They're pointing the wrong people. Number one, this is like the life story of the PPP. They appointed the wrong people. They want to tell us that Sis Narayan Singh did so well. They promoted him to High Commissioner to the what do you call it? To Europe, to the EU. High Commissioner to the EU. He did so well. They promoted him out of the industry. I have no doubt that Paul Chong is going to go the same way. So they promoted all the wrong people in the top management. They have politicized the industry. That is their track record. And they have failed to hold anyone accountable, as they always do. You remember last night we talked about Priya? Priya said, I could hold you accountable. I could carry this matter to the police, but I'm not going to do it. Failed to hold anyone accountable. That's one of the threads running through this government. Total and abject failure to do that. And then, folks, Gaisuko has become, according to Christopher Ram, Chartered Accountant and Attorney at Law, Gaisuko has become a theater of dysfunction. It has become a theater of dysfunction. And Spanish girls in the boardroom. I ain't knocking Spanish girls, by the way. I ain't knocking Spanish girls. But here what has been our track record. We took what were unpopular but necessary decisions. This is the APNU AFC. We introduced structural transitions at Gaisuko and skills support. Again, this is the retraining and the retooling they're now trying with. Right? And the closure of the few sugar estates, they were a matter of economic realism. Again, I will refer to the numbers that Onyx just gave us on the live. You know, sugar being bought at 14 to 35 cents, and we producing at $1.35, $1.14. So the closures were part of the economic realism of the time. And if that still doesn't prevail, why haven't they opened all the estates? They opened Rose Hall, I think it is, but nothing on grind in there. Nothing on bun in there. Right. It was never about what the PPP tried to make it about. Political revenge. These are part of the PPP base, so we can fight them. It was never about that. You know, it's never about that. And as we wrap up, folks, Gaisuko is now a battlefield for political legacy, not agricultural revival. Don't let Irfan try to kerfuffle you. It's about political legacy, not about agricultural revival. And Ram himself, famed chartered accountant, famed attorney at law, He has offered some economic realism. While Chung, the current CEO of Gaisuko, he is selling optimism. Since them boys coming the optimistic, but then coming off the mark. The PPP promises continue to cost this nation, friends, without delivering the returns. What have we gotten for $30 billion invested in Gaisuko? What have we gotten for $40 billion invested in Gaisuko? And again, I say the PPP promises continue to cost this nation without delivering the returns. Folks, sugar once built this country, right? It must not now break it. It must not. And that's what you're from them recognizing slowly. You hear them talking about corn, planting cassava. That's going to do it for us this evening. Thanks for joining us, folks. Subscribe to our broadcast if you're joining us via YouTube. Share your thoughts in the comment section. Please and thank you. Is sugar worth saving, or is it time to let it go? Follow us on all our platforms. Please and thank you. Share the live. Smash that emoji button, good folks. And partner with us as well. That's our time for this evening. Good folks. And that's our program. Good to have seen so many of you on the live tonight as we're giving out the facts here. Anasi and Jillian, thank you so much for all your thoughts there. Onyx Duncan, Christopher Chichester, Nikki Richmond, all the other folks who are joining us. Jillian Solomon, Diane Graves-Andy, Tommy Gates, Shamila Edgel on the live tonight. Good to see all of you folks. Have a great rest of the evening and rest well. Sleep well, folks. Please don't bother about a thing. Right? Please and thank you. Don't do it. Stay well.